And I hear them, and almost every time, and it was fun staying there because I just stayed behind the door and listened. Because almost everyone that came up the stairs, well, that's a room, or this is the room, right? And so I hear them come up the stairs making a bunch of noise, and they're out there. Oh, I think that's the room. That's the room. And I think there was, I don't know, there was what is it? People through the door or not, but I could hear them. So I knew they were right outside the door. And I shook the door. And they ran off. So I saw them the next day, and I think I did tell them that because I didn't know them. But nothing really happened. The only thing that happened right before I went to bed was I heard, now that's a huge stairway, right? The restaurants below and the bars below closed. I heard what I could only explain as a cart coming down the hallway, and that room 3 is just right above the stairs, and there's a long hallway that goes beyond it. But if you're in a hotel and you hear a cart that has plates and cups and things on it, and it's kind of, that's what I heard. But if you're bringing food up from somewhere, you're not bringing it from there. And I heard the cart, and then I stopped, and then I opened the door, and I looked down. There was nothing there. And even if there could have been, I don't know how they would have done it. There wasn't. So that's the only thing that happened to me. And of course, it could have been anything. I don't know, but I didn't see anything. All right, that's room 3. That's room 3 there. There's the stairway, room 1 and 2 are there. 1 and 2 are the rooms that are connected to the woman's figure. 1, because people see a woman in those rooms. Sometimes they see her in the window from the street sometimes. And there is a heaviness also kind of in that room. And so there's a story about how she was murdered in that room. Okay, not a whole lot of history to prove that. Okay, so what name do you give a woman in Portland? Rose. Okay, so she's Rose. It's Rose and Sam, but Sam we know existed. Some people say, well, Sam and Rose were a couple. And some say one of the past owners of the bar who brought ladies in, there was something that happened there. But no one really knows this. So there's all sorts of these stories, but it just is a fascinating place because there are definitely things happening there, but no one knows exactly the history to prove it. All right, that's the hallway going down. And actually down at the end of the hallway, there is a Sam's immigration papers. So you know he existed. There's a picture of him. There's his papers. We knew this is a person that was connected with this place. All right, we're going to move on. Edgefield Kennedy School. I did paranormal pubs at Kennedy School. An amazing place. I did paranormal pub at Mission Theater. We're hoping to bring those back with McMinimans, but Edgefield Kennedy School, other amazing haunted places to go to. I'm not going to get into those because I don't want to get into my other stuff, but here's what people need to know if you go to any of the haunted McMinimans. Go, if it's a hotel, I don't know if all the restaurants do it. I don't think it does. I think it's just the hotels. But any of the McMinimans hotels, ask for the ghost log. They don't promote it too much, but if you go to the front desk, ask for the ghost log, they will give you the book. Okay, and the book from Edgefield or Kennedy School, and it's basically everyone's stories from if they stayed the night at the hotel. They'll write their story and put it in the book. If you leave your license with them, you can take the book, as long as in your building and look through it and read the stories. It's pretty fascinating. I've done that many times to look at stories and see what people are talking about. Edgefield. Kennedy School has, it's a creepy school, right? There's kids wandering around. Why would these kids want to stay there? Why would the teachers want to stay there? Nobody knows. Okay. But I think Edgefield's much more haunted. Edgefield has the story of the Multnomah Poor Farm. It was the second Multnomah Poor Farm where a lot of people who died there there was some concern there may be bodies still buried on that property. And why? Because, every time they do construction at the zoo, what do they find? They found 9 bodies, okay, at the Portland Zoo. Anytime when they did the elephant exhibit, when they do these, they find bodies. Why? Because that was the Multnomah County Poor Farm before they built Edgefield. And so people were buried on those properties and are still being found. And As far as I know, they've kept them, reburied them on the property at the zoo, but look it up. There's some incredible history there. And there's still a belief. They were doing testing at the old Oregon State Hospital on the property fairly recently and talking about, are there people still buried in these places? Okay. Speaking of burials, Riverview Cemetery, one of the most, not my favorite cemetery in Portland. That would be Lone Fir Cemetery, but Riverview Cemetery, I want to talk to you about that because we're going to talk about the haunted Willamette, or the wicked Willamette, that I like to call. Riverview Cemetery is right on up above, looking over the Willamette River, across from Oaks Park. Okay, so we're going to get into Oaks Park. These are part of my Selwood tours. All right. Riverview Cemetery, some amazing people buried at Mountain View Cemetery. Sorry, people buried at Mountain View Cemetery that are amazing too. We're going to do a cemetery tour to there tomorrow night. Riverview Cemetery, 1889. Just went up there the other day to check it out. I haven't been up there in a while, and it's an amazing cemetery to walk through. If you drive into Portland on Macadam or through Lake Oswego way, when you get out to where the Selwood Bridge is, you see that amazing brick mansion or house that's there. That's the cemetery up from there. It's beautiful. I think they completely wrecked that building, that new bridge, and it was so beautiful in there. But get up into the cemetery and walk around there. Some amazing people from Oregon City buried there. George Abernathy. Okay, we know George Abernathy is the territorial governor. It's buried up there. We have George Atkinson. It's buried there. His church is right across the street. Okay, so there's a whole series of Georges that are buried there. There's a whole series of Henrys buried there. Henry Weinhardt, probably maybe the most famous up there at Riverview Cemetery. They frequently find beer bottles here, sitting here. And of course, we know we have the Weinhardt building downtown Oregon City. So a lot of amazing connections in history to Oregon City from Riverview Cemetery. All right, the bizarre story of William Ladd. All right, I am going to do this story fairly quick, so I'm not going to give you all the details. I'll give you from what I can remember in my memory because we want to get down there. It's a story I tell in great depth on the Selwood tour. William Ladd was mayor of Portland at one time. Okay, and he had a lot of money. He got a lot of his money through foreclosures and a lot of other things and built a wealth, but he was not well liked by some people, especially people that he ended up the owner of their property. Okay. Well, there was two. There were two characters. We'll just name them characters, and I guess I didn't put the slides into them, so I'll try to get to that so I can at least give you the right names and stuff. All right. So there's these characters. Daniel Magone. Now, the Magone name is something you'll see if you go across the river into West Lynn, Magone Lane. Magone's family owned a big piece of property there in West Lynn. Magone had a series of tragedies. Magone, his daughter, and I'm not going to be able to see this because my eyes are all blurry, but Magone lost his daughter, saw his daughter drown in the Willamette River. And I don't know all the details behind it, but it was something that changed him. He was never the same, as any of us could imagine. He had financial issues, and so the family property and wealth that had been left to him, which wasn't much, was very hard to keep. And eventually, with issues with his financing, his property was foreclosed upon. And so immediately, William Ladd was, a target, whether or not he was part of that, but the whole concept of this guy making money off of people was something that bothered Magone. On the Oregon City side of the river, there was another character, okay, and his name was Charles Montgomery. And Charles Montgomery grew up kind of in a not stable place, and so he ran into another character that lived around Oregon City named Hiram Hill. Okay, and Hiram Hill was kind of a shyster, and Charles Montgomery was also having a hard time with finances. And Hiram Hill basically said, well, I have this great business idea. Give me $500 and we'll be partners. And I think his business idea was that they were going to set up a general store on one of the tribal lands. I don't know how this scheme was going to work, but it was all a sham. But Montgomery gave Hill $500, which disappeared, and of course never heard anything about again or this company. And then later on said, well, I need another 500. And so they start going out of town of Oregon City, and Montgomery shoots Hill in the back, killing him, and then claims it was self-defense. And the story's now one-sided because Hill's dead. So guess who gets let out of jail? Montgomery gets let out of jail. He doesn't stay in there very long. And he meets Magone. And they start drinking in Oregon City, and they start talking about things, and they both have they both are mad, right? They're both in a mess in their lives. They don't have any money. And a lot of the issues they had with the foreclosing of their properties and various things somehow was a target of William Ladd, because his family was rich. The problem was William was dead and buried at Riverview Cemetery. Well, why don't we dig him up? We could dig up William Ladd. Now, his grave is probably watched by the family because they're really wealthy, so there's probably wires or something there. There's probably it's a whole crazy story, okay? So they're worried about getting caught by going to the grave because it might be monitored by the family, and they do all these things, okay? Well, gets down to it. They find two more people, and they tell them that their plan is to dig up William Ladd and ask for a ransom for his body, okay? But they want to take the money for themselves and not give the money to the two stooges that are helping them, who they tell we're going to dig up the body and sell it back as a medical specimen, okay? Which was not the plan at all. The plan was to take the body and hold it for ransom for the family. All right, so they do a first attempt. They put a boat down the Willamette, and they at the bottom of the hillside, and they go up to the cemetery, and they try to, but something happens, and they get spooked. So that's the dress rehearsal. I think within that week they go the second time. They go up there, they dig William's body out. I don't know which one of them was in the boat and which one of them was up there at the time, but they were also trying to monitor things to see if they were being watched or whatever. They dig William Ladd's body. He was almost 300 pounds when he died. And so just getting him out of the ground was complicated. Then to get him out of the grave and down the whole riverbank from the hill of the cemetery down to a waiting boat. Okay? So they make a mess all the way down in terms of breaking limbs, and there's a trail, right? Okay, so the next day, the grave is gone. There hadn't even been a marker placed on the grave yet because it took so long to get headstones made and shipped here, so they still had just the wood plank in there that said his name, which they took because that was their proof that they had, which why do you need proof? His body is literally gone and there's a hole in the ground. Okay. So the Portland police go up to the cemetery, and what do you know? They find a knife in the bottom of the grave. The body's gone, but they say, well, clearly the body went here down to the river. They know it went to the river, but which way did the boat go? That's the only question. And who was on the boat? Well, that knife in the grave, they go to a blacksmith in downtown Portland, and they say, oh yeah, I sold that knife to, and I can't remember which one of the stooges it was sold to, but that's who they track it to. I think it was Magone. Okay, so now not only do they know it's Magone, but they know the body's in West Lynn, probably, because that's where he lived. So immediately they go there, and that was the day later, like a day or two later, they were already had. And they all turn on each other, and it's a big, ridiculous mess. Okay, so now if you go up to William Ladd's grave, it is That's his grave, literally. It's a cement cover over his grave so that he's never dug up again. Okay? Not so much a ghost story, but an incredible story of Portland. All right, and Oregon City, and West Lynn. All right, Haunted Willamette River. Are we doing pretty good? We're not bad. Okay. Although I have 100 more slides, but all right. Haunted Willamette River. We know that a lot of boats have gone over the falls. We know that a lot of other vessels have gone over the falls, and unfortunately, that happened just recently. And I think what's interesting about that, as maybe you in this audience were, and people at home were shocked by, well, when a body is lost over the falls, people are looking for the body. And what happens when you look for bodies? You find them. And you keep finding them. Okay? And by the end of the summer, it was 9 bodies out of the Willamette. And people were like, that is crazy. It's not. You just don't hear about it. But that's the norm. Okay? And I don't know if I got the slides in the right order. We'll talk about that just in a second. But think of the history of this river. Think about all the possible tragedies that can happen on this river, and how long it takes to find somebody in a river, especially if you're not looking. This is the area behind the courthouse, 8th Street Dock. A lot of history there. I'm going to kind of skip by that. But if you came from Oregon City or Portland, back and forth, this is where you came into Oregon City, on the 8th Street Dock behind the courthouse. That was the steamboat dock. A lot of amazing stories there. But people coming and going along that river for all this history and the lives lost in that river and around it. The Gazelle explosion. Not only people dying in the river by the falls and in drowning or suicides, but there was a steamboat explosion of the Gazelle up above Willamette Falls in Oregon City. And I talk about this a lot on the tour. Well, not a lot, but I read this. It was, imagine Oregon City, the big city. People are coming by boat from Portland to Oregon City because there was Kanema Park, which was the amusement park here. A lot of people came here, and eventually that grew on to the other amusement park because they wanted to sell ridership on the streetcar lines that started in Oregon City at the falls and went to Portland. So the whole history of the amusement parks is incredible. But the Gazelle, April 8th, 1854, terrible accident. Steamboat Gazelle blown up this morning at Kanema, over 20 killed and 25 wounded. After a portion of our edition had been worked off this morning, the startling news reached our city of the Willamette Falls Company news steamer Gazelle. We stopped the press and dispatched a messenger to the scene of this melancholy disaster for the purpose of obtaining the particulars. Our reporter gathered the following facts. The Willamette Falls steamer Gazelle left this morning at 6:30 o'clock, had just landed at Kanema at 15 minutes before 7 when a terrible explosion of her boilers took place, blowing up her upper works cabin and after part, which were literally torn to pieces. This one is the one that bothers me. April 9th, the next day, 1854, Portland is a brand new city. Doesn't even have a cemetery to bury people. And now 20 people from Portland are dead. Now, not all of them were from Portland, but the majority were from Portland. Probably a more heart-rending scene has never occurred on the Pacific coast. 1854, they're saying nothing ever that tragic has ever happened, not to mention the native story in this place or any of the other stories, but this 20 people dying on a steamboat, not to downplay the importance and the tragedy of 20 people dying on a steamboat, but this is the most maybe significant. It says probably a more heart-rending scene has never occurred upon the Pacific coast. As soon as the smoke cleared away, hundreds of citizens who were very ready to help the dying gathered on the wreck, and the work of aid commenced. Fragments of bodies were found scattered in every direction, some onto the shore and some onto the river. The majority of the victims were thrown about the deck among all kinds of fractured machinery and freight. A more horrible sight can hardly be imagined. Oregon City, 1854. That is right along the Willamette River here in Oregon City. Most people don't even see this little plaque. And where the explosion took place is just above the falls where Feckin Brewery used to be, kind of in that area. And so pretty amazing history. The engineer of the steamboat knew there was going to be an explosion. He freaked out. He didn't tell anybody. Jumps off the boat, runs up the dock to save himself, and the boat explodes. He was prosecuted for that. And the owner of the steamboat property happened to own a piece of property where some family burials were on and said, I will donate land to a cemetery. That's how Lone First Cemetery is built. And all the victims of the Steamboat Gazelle were buried at Lone First Cemetery. And that's where Lone First Cemetery starts. In Portland on the east side. An amazing cemetery. It's a park. It's a very Portland park. You go through there, you'll see people juggling. You'll see people having picnics, riding their bikes through the cemetery. It's an experience, and it's an amazing historic place. All right, there's the articles I just pointed out. This is the Willamette River from Oaks Park or Oaks Bottom. So we're now on the other side of the Willamette from the Selwood Bridge, and we're going to talk about this. So this is Willamette Week in 2017. We talk, well, isn't it unusual? Nearly every week a body is found in Portland River. This is not normal. Yes, it is. Okay. This is Coin 2025. Bodies found in the Portland area river is pretty normal. About once a month. Okay. Once a month. All right. And if you talk to anyone that you know is a cop or anyone that you know that this is true, okay? Why don't we hear about them? Most of them are accidents and suicides. You don't hear that. You don't hear about that kind of stuff. So it is true. It happens frequently. All right, there's the bridge going out over there, Riverview Cemetery up in here. Oh, sorry, up in here. All right. All right, so what are we talking about next? Oh, so okay. Oaks Park, too, we'll get to. I started doing tours in Selwood. I'm starting to do tours in other places just once or twice a year to just kind of build a tour, because if you do a tour in a place you've lived 45 years, you get time. Selwood and Portland, I'm learning some of their history, so I do kind of test tours with the history I know, and then I get to know people, and I start knowing the community. That's what I did in Seaside, and I start building that, and I can start telling, oh, we haven't even got to Seaside yet. Okay. All right, there's me in Selwood. We're going to skip to Moreland Theater. I want Moreland Theater to be haunted so badly. If anyone has a story about Moreland Theater, as long as it is not baloney, right? I don't tell any story, but here's the thing. When I do a tour in Oregon City or anywhere, I walk the route the way I think I have stories to and history to prove it. But as I go by those places, I'm like, that one's gotta be. That one, there's a house down here in Oregon City that I walked by for years saying, I know that place is haunted, but I just don't have the story. I'm just going to keep walking by until I find one. And eventually someone will come out of the house and say, well, you do tours? Well, I'll tell you this story. And that's what's starting to happen in Portland, and Selwood, but not to that extent that I want. To give you a point, the most of the places in the theater, most of the stories revolve around the bathroom. This is a TripAdvisor review of the Moreland Theater 2023. It's a comfortable theater with good snacks, but in the women's restroom, it feels hard to breathe and haunted. It feels like there are eyes on you. Maybe haunted, ? Here's one thing that you can be assured of in any old building in Portland or hotel: the women's restroom's haunted. It just is. Every McMiniman's, the women's restroom's haunted. Never the men's restroom. All right. So every time I go to the movies, and I'm trying to go to the movies a lot more at the Moreland Theater, not dressed like this, obviously, I asked the kid at the counter, I said, so any ghost stories? And he said, oh, yeah, it's been crazy upstairs, which is where the restrooms are. And I was like, oh, yes. And he said, last week, the toilet broke down. We were out of toilet paper. It started leaking. Oh, okay. I guess that's not a ghost story. Okay. So, all right, Kay's Bar. Kay's Bar is super haunted, but I'm gonna move on. There's some cool things about Kay's Bar, but some of it's the generic ghost stories. There's a connection with Kay's Bar to the movie Deliverance, and the author of the book that made the movie, connected to Reed College. If you ever go into Selwood and you want to go to a dive bar, that's the place to go if you want some ghost stories. And it's basically employees and various things. There's also look it up in Oregon if you want anything Kay's Bar. I'm not going to go through all of it, but lights, basically shadow people and people workers having to turn the light off before they leave, but the light to switch to turn off the lights for the bar is not even close to the door, so they kind of hit the lights and run for the doors. But they're pretty generic ghost stories. There's one photograph that was taken in the back kitchen of an apparition like in the 1960s, and that has led to all the ghost stories of Kay's Bar. All right. Let's talk about this place. Not haunted. Well, it may be. Has anyone ever been to Wilhelm's Portland Memorial? Ooh, it may be the coolest place. If you love history and you love ghost stories, or you love the paranormal, or you love, well, I love walking through cemeteries. I do. It's beautiful. You learn so much history. This place is incredible. Started in 1901, and so you have 8 floors. It's a labyrinth, and I'm not kidding you when you say a labyrinth. It's like 8 miles of hallways, and it goes down and down and down and down, and it's every possible piece of history from the 1900s. You enter one building, it's this time period you enter. I got some pictures here just to show you because we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. But they're really cracking down on the amount of time that people could go into that building. It used to be that you could get in there fairly often, and after COVID too, that was part of it. But there is one particular place on the property that everyone wants to get into, and that's the Ray Room. And the Ray Room is usually only open one day a year. And there's usually a line down the block for the Ray Room. I don't know how long we're going to have to talk about the Ray Room. I'll go through that pretty quick too, but I want to get to Seaside. All right, if you've never been to Portland Memorial, here's just some of my favorite areas of the place. All right. This is one of the older areas, and so there's urns, and there's remains throughout the whole place. There's all sorts of different types of places in this building, and sometimes you have to go up down one elevator and down the hallway to another stairway to another floor, and then another elevator to another. You could spend the entire day there and not see this place. There's furniture just left in the hallways that have been there forever, of different time periods. You see different time periods, and there's almost no one ever there. And even if there's 100 people there, you'll never see anyone wandering in there because it's so big and it's just quiet. And you walk through. This is one of my favorite areas where it's the stairways going up to multiple levels, and room and chamber after chamber. And you'll come across names of Portland history and different things. It's amazing. This is probably my favorite photos of that place. This is more, not too crypt. There's one that's all just the plastic flowers in there. All right, this will be talking outside. The Ray Room is right here, in here. And, okay, how do I tell the story quick? Ray was a lumber baron, okay? And if you were going to make a fortune in Oregon or in Portland, wood was probably one of the ways you were going to do it. On my Selwood tour, I joked there was Portland, which was called what? Stumptown. So you build a city, you cut down the trees, you build a city of Portland called Stumptown. You have all these stumps. And then Portland grows too big, and you have to cut down some more trees. And so you sell the wood, and now you can build more houses and add on. That's not why it's named Selwood, but it makes sense. Okay. So the Ray Room, George Ray, he made a fortune with lumber, okay, furniture, etc. We won't go into that. he has a wife, okay? And I think I have a picture of Ray. I didn't mention this. Tons and tons of stained glass windows at the memorial. One of the biggest collections, second collection of Povey Brother windows. The biggest collection of Povey Brother windows right across the street, Atkinson Church. Okay, Povey Brothers were the Tiffany's kind of the West Coast. They're some amazing windows and they're very valuable. So anyway, Povey Brothers Church or Povey Brothers windows. The Povey Brothers are buried here also, which is cool. All right, the Ray Room. This is the entrance to the Ray Room. George Ray has this fortune. He has a wife, Charlotte. Lottie is her nickname. She started to have some mental decline and eventually was not doing well, and they put her into the Oregon State Asylum. All right. Well, Charlotte lives the rest of her life at the state hospital. Well, George Ray decides to marry the woman that's been their help in the house for many, many years, who's 27 years younger, Elizabeth Ray. Now, what do people of Portland think of this? It was a major scandal. And people didn't know what to think of it. And so then the lawsuit starts because George Ray doesn't have has a daughter, but not a blood daughter. So the daughter and her husband start fighting for the money, right? Because George Ray had millions. And they sure as heck figured, as he had changed the will, the money was now going to go to his new wife. So a lot of scandal broke out. They accused her of being a prostitute. They accused her of being all these things because they were trying to demean her and to get the money. But in the end, the money all went to Elizabeth. George Ray was built in a family plot. He was exhumed by Elizabeth. And she spent, I don't know what the money is worth today, but she built this monument, this shrine, a tomb for her and George, but she wasn't dead yet. And that's the Ray Room. And this is the Ray Room. Marble from all, Italy. I mean, it's in the millions. It wasn't at the time, but she spent a ton of money. Okay. And then when she died, she was buried next to him. There's a stained glass window with a pine tree up in the back cut representing the fortune that he had made off of lumber. And that window, stained glass window on the bottom, says the end of a perfect day. And that's the Ray Room. It's amazing. And you can only, I don't know if they've changed it, so you only go in there one day a year. Okay. That's the look from Oaks Bottom of the place that I just talked about. So you can see how massive that place is. Okay. There's also a lot of stories about Oaks Bottom being haunted. And a lot of that's tied to the presence of this building. I can't remember how many thousands of people are at rest there. It's huge. All right. Well, I'm scared to look at the time. Okay. Oaks Park. Oh, we're going to do this fast too. Oaks Park, it's haunted. The carousel is haunted. People see little, ghost kids at the carousel. Oaks Park, way back when I was doing this in the 1990s, getting into the paranormal, I was part of a paranormal group, and you would do investigations. And a lot of times the investigation places didn't want you to tell where they were doing investigations. And so we were asked to do a ghost investigation of Seven Oaks. It was Oaks Park. Okay. Oaks Park asked us to investigate Oaks Park. We didn't have a lot of success in finding anything there, but for a long, long time there have been stories at Oaks Park, but a lot of generic stories that I'm not going to go into. But little kids ghosts. There's and a lot of carousel. There's a worker that talks about the lights on the go-kart track coming off and on by themselves, which is right behind the carousel. So some interesting stories there. But my favorite part of Oaks Park is its connection to the history of the electricity and the streetcar lines and the Lewis and Clark exposition and the first electric lights that are all tied to Willamette Falls. It's all tied together. It's a pretty incredible place. And I love, even though they may not intentionally be doing this, the slogan of our Oaks Park. I couldn't think of a better slogan for Oaks Park or a motto for Oaks Park. And I don't even think that they know that they're perpetuating ghost stories by doing it, but I love it because it's Oaks Park where the fun never ends. I love that so much. If you really think about it, it's amazing. All right, Seaside. My second home at Seaside. I walk around like this in Seaside, and it's like I'm in Oregon City. I'm beginning to know everyone in Seaside, and I'm not going to move there, but I spent a lot of time there. So I started the Oregon Ghost Conference in Seaside. I had to move it out of this town to Seaside because it got too big. The largest paranormal convention probably in the United States is now in Seaside. It's in our 14th year coming up. We've signed contracts with the city of Seaside until 2030. It's crazy amazing. So I'm doing ghost tours in Seaside. I'll tell you some of Seaside. Why? I told them when I went to Seaside, I need to know what the stories are of Seaside. They said, well, it's all based on Ben Holiday. I said, okay, got it. Ben Holiday built the railroads from Oregon City to Seaside and all these other places. And so if you know the history of Oregon City, you know the history of every place on the West Coast almost. All right. So that was my start. I got to meet tons of people. My first real connection in Seaside was, okay, we're going to go back to Ben Holiday. Why is Seaside named Seaside? Because Ben Holiday took his money, built the railroad, but he needs people. He built a seaside home in Seaside before he built the railroad out there. His seaside home became a vacation place where people could come out there and vacation to go to a horse track that was there and whatever, and then eventually built the railroad there, and then the city becomes Seaside because it's a seaside home. All right. There's a dedication to him outside of the convention center. The convention center said, we want you to move. I never called the city of Seaside. I did a ghost conference in Oregon City, 3 years. City of Seaside called, said, we want you to move it to Oregon City, which I said, well, it was 4 years maybe. I said, well, I haven't told anyone this, but I can't host it in Oregon City anymore. It's gotten too big, and there's other issues too. And tell me why I need to move it to Seaside. They said, come here and we'll show you. And I said, we're moving it. The convention center was haunted. They started sending me surveillance camera footage of things happening in the convention center. I started walking around the hotels, said, stay the night and spend the night in Seaside. We'll tell you more stuff. And it's fascinating. All right. So the stage has a hallway behind the convention center that is haunted. It was very haunted when we started doing the convention center, but the convention center during COVID and during that time, actually before that, started a complete renovation and addition to the convention center where they changed the convention center, added onto it, where this hallway now randomly doesn't have access to the public anymore. The most haunted hallway in that place. I don't think they did it intentionally because the other side of the building is the river and they can't go any farther. But it's kind of weird that the one haunted place of the building is not as accessible to the public anymore as it was. But when we first started going there, you could walk down the hallways and go around the corner and say, there's something wrong in this hallway. And when you have a convention of psychics and all these people, everyone's like, this is the hallway. No connection to the convention center itself, most likely the connection to the native history of Seaside. And most of Seaside is built on the remains of other tribes that live there, the Clatsop tribe and things like that. Okay. All right. There's me in Seaside. There's that picture up there. All right. The bridge tender was the first place that I started getting connected to it. It was owned by a family by the last name of Smith, not related. They contacted me and said, Rocky, we know you are doing this ghost conference in Seaside. We want to let people tour our building and investigate it. I've been in the bridge tender. If you've ever been into Seaside and you're of age, go into the bridge tender. It's a dive bar, but it's amazing. It's a bar that has apartments above and has its entire history. So you know the story, or at least the legend of the bridge tender. very much the same as the legends of maybe the Trails End Saloon or the White Eagle. Okay. What I did not know is that there was an upstairs, because there's no windows. You go into the bar and that's it. There's restrooms at the back. There's no stairway to get upstairs. I didn't even know there was an upstairs at all. And the owner of the bar says, well, we want to open the upstairs. The upstairs? Yeah, there's 7 apartments up there that haven't been used since the 60s or 70s. Now, they were all single rooms with a shared living room, a shared kitchen, and a shared bathroom that adds to the stories of what that place may have been in the past, but there's no proof of it. And so the story of the bridge tender is that the woman that haunts the place, the madam, is still there. And but I said, well, how do you get upstairs? Well, there was a fire. This was a different bar. There was a fire in like the early 70s, and the firemen that responded to the bridge tender bought it afterwards. And they closed off the second floor, and they took the escapes off the side of it. There is no stairway to get upstairs anymore. So I said, how do you expect us to take tours of people going upstairs? Well, we go through a ladder. We go with a ladder through a hole in the ceiling of a little teeny office in the back of the bar. And the owner, Leroy and Katie Smith at the time, they said, and Leroy took great privilege in this. The first time I went up there, he said, there's the ladder, here's the hole, go. I was like, no one's going up there with it. Oh, no, just go. And he only would stay at the bottom of the ladder and just wait. So, and he did this, I think, to multiple people over time after me. But I go up through the hole, and you go up through the hole, you're in the dark, and you're in this small little room. And there's some wallpaper, but nothing there. And he says, you're in the bathroom. You just went up through the toilet. Now go look around. So you're going to these little apartments. It's incredible. The main bar, the madam still haunts that area too. If you're rude to the bartenders or need to be cut off, things happen. Okay. People talk about coins being flicked off the bar and hitting them. That no one knows what caused it. I think it was a staple of something that flipped on somebody. So things like that. The madam takes care of the bridge tender and the people there. Okay. I know we're never going to get through half of this. All right. The first time I walked into the bridge tender, I thought this was the corner that was, actually, this corner that bothered me the most. Behind these pool tables is the restrooms and this corner, and that's the problem. I said, yeah, that's the problem, and the restrooms are the problem. I could feel it immediately. Mostly, there's other spirits there other than the madam. Okay, but we're going to get into this a little bit more in detail. Women's bathroom, of course, right? Now, I don't spend a ton of time in women's restrooms, but I do spend probably a lot more than other people that are men. Okay. So this is Pacific North Weird, which is an amazing YouTube channel that covers weird things of Oregon. One of the episodes is just about the Oregon Ghost Conference. It was filmed a few years ago. If you look up Pacific North Weird Oregon Ghost Conference, watch it. It's a bit about what we do in Seaside. So we're in the women's bathroom. He's filming. I'm talking about the ghost stories of the Seaside bridge tender and the bathroom. And this is the hallway going into the bathroom. Around the corner, there's a sink and there's a stall there on the left. I'm standing against the wall, and he's standing against where the door is to the stall. And we're talking, and he says, there was a man, blah, 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 playing pool one day. I'm kind of talking about the ghost story that happened on the other side of the wall. And he says, yeah. He's like, yells, really? And I'm like, what happened? He said, something touched my leg. Really? Yeah, I'm serious. Okay, now he's standing with his back against the door of the stall. So my process is not, it's a ghost. you backed up to the stall and that door opened and now it came back and gave you a little bump. And he is like, oh no, something grabbed me. So he was not feeling a bump from the door. He said somebody, gave him a little pinch. And so that's all on film. Things happen in that restroom. Things happen in the men's restroom there too. There's kid ghosts that hang out in the upstairs of the building. No one really knows who the kids are. But there is an addition built of 3 shops next to the bridge tender that are different tourism shops. And they're all haunted. And the ghosts of the bridge tender, because it's connected to all those shops that own the same, go in there through all those buildings. And so they all have ghost stories. This is the attic. And this is the cobwebs you see in movies. That's what it looks like. It's real. I said, don't touch those, right? This is the upstairs of the bridge tender. Oh, there's me. I don't know what I was pointing at. Every bit of history, 25-cent beers, signs. It's incredible up there. It's basically turned into storage for the old apartments and the things that were there. I'm going to go through. This is one of the rooms that bothers me the most. Here's a closet up there. Now, the madam. Next door to the bridge tender, a psychic opened up a shop. This is long gone by now, but that shop's still there. The building's still there, and the other shop's in it. Tiffany wanted to open up a shop, psychic shop, and she didn't know about the ghost stories, so immediately puts a sign on the windows that says, Madam Tiffany's. And things started happening. And Katie and Roy said, you're going to have to take that off. There's only one madam on this block, and you're not in. So she did. The other story that's really well known at Bridge Tender is they had a jukebox, and the jukebox had a CD in it, an ABBA CD in it that played Dancing Queen. And if you played Dancing Queen at the Bridge Tender, maybe also that was offensive to the madam, chaos happens with the jukebox. The CD would be spit out or various things would happen. So eventually they removed that CD completely. The old jukebox was still in there up to COVID time, but then when they had to make space for people to sit, once they had people coming back in, they put a new jukebox in there that I can barely work, and people stick coins in, but that's where you're supposed to take your debit card or whatever. We tried. I'm too old to figure it out. But what happens when you have a jukebox that's on the wall, you can have access to any dang song you want, right? So now, of course, I walk into Bridge Tender every time. I load up the jukebox with about 20 times in a row, Dancing Queen, and then I leave. It's a tradition. All right. Seaside Salts. These are all shops that have moved out. There was a woman that worked at Seaside Salts who also, and I won't go into the details, the woman was working during the winter months. During the winter months, it's really stormy in Seaside, and people don't come to Seaside that much. So if you own a shop, you're sitting there a lot. She was sitting in a shop, and she got a phone call from a friend who just had a bad diagnosis, a health diagnosis. And so she was really upset when she talked to her friend because her friend was upset. She hung up the phone, and she just started crying. She said, I was just so upset. I just started crying. I was sitting there in this dark because it was so stormy and outside. No one was coming into the shop. And she said, a tear went down my cheek, and I felt hands on my face wiping that tear off. It was the madam. There are stories in that whole block. It's so incredible. I love this place. The bad news came where after a couple of years at Seaside, of the Bridge Tender owners giving us full access to their building and closing some of their shops and letting us into their shops at night with products and stuff for free. And we charge tickets for people to go through. They've let us do that for those several years. And then they called me one night, so we're selling the bar. And I was like, which, that's their, well, actually, before they sold the bar, I got a call one night, a couple years after the first ghost tour. And Katie called, and she said, Rocky, people are wanting to know if you're going to do the ghost conference again. And I said, well, yeah, why? She said, well, people want to tour the building. I said, Katie, it's your building. She said, I know, but I told them they can't go up there without you. And so I said, yes, we're doing a ghost conference. And so then they tell me they're selling the building a year or so after that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I said that. I, was worried about that. But eventually I soon knew that part of the sale to the new owners was the tradition continues. And we still now good friends with the new owners. And as far as I know, I'm the only person who can take people up in the second floor of that building, and it only happens 2 nights a year during the Oregon Ghost Conference. And those tickets sell out, but it's a great place. Hundreds of stories on this block in each of these buildings. So come to Seaside and in spring break, and I'll take you around. All right. Okay, we're doing okay. I love Seaside because of its connection, I think, to Oregon City. Not only that guy that built the railroad, Ben Holiday, but think about this. Have you ever heard of someone that plotted out a town and then said, you know what, the entire length of the city I'm donating back to the city for public use as a park? I only know of 2 places. It's this place, McLaughlin Promenade, and the Seaside Promenade. The mayor of Seaside donated that whole ocean front to the city because this should be the public's. Same as McLaughlin did to the promenade here. This belongs to the people of this town. This belongs to the native people of this town. And it's going to be hopefully officially a park someday. We're still working on it. That's a whole nother city story. You can ask me that. Gilbert, Alexander Gilbert, immigrant, comes to Astoria first, then to Seaside. He builds a small mansion and then adds on to it. It's a mansion right to the left of that gigantic timeshare building. You kind of go back and see it. That's Alexander Gilbert's mansion. In Seaside, you see the Gilbert Walk. That's because in 1912, the city of Seaside burned to the ground, most of it, on that side of the river. And as mayor of Seaside in 1912, he built all the new buildings in concrete, fireproof, after that fire. Okay, so not only is that, there's so many connections to Gilbert because there's the timeshares, and the turnaround there in Shiloh Inn. All right, Shiloh Inn, which is no longer Shiloh Inn, was the Hotel Moore, 1905. Was the Hotel Seaside, 1919 to 1959. Was the Seasider Hotel, still the same building, up until 1984. So imagine the stories, and imagine the spirits in that building. And imagine people's connection to that place. And all the people that lived in Seaside and worked in all those hotels for generations and generations. And then this eyesore is built. And people were furious. Now that creates the other eyesore on the other side. But it blocks everything Seaside. Now, within Seaside, there's politics and things about the feelings of that. But Shiloh Inn was not really welcomed too much at that time when they built it. Okay, a lot of people, when they lost their jobs, because most of the people that worked in those hotels went to the next hotel because it just changed hands or changed names. But now the hotel was gone, and it was going to take years to build the new hotel. So all those people lost their jobs. And it's always said that the old hotel was haunted. So what happens when you tear down the hotel and you build a new one on top? Well, most of the time the ghost stories stay. But here they didn't. People said, it's not haunted anymore. Now, sometimes that's just something people say. Okay? But here's the cool story. A lot of the workers that worked in the hotel had to get new jobs. Oh, now it's new hotel. Shiloh Inn's out. The new hotel that they're still working on right now, it's open, but they're under construction, is the Promenade Inn and Suites, 2024, 2025. A lot of the workers at the hotels, when they lost their job, got jobs in other places in Seaside. A lot of the people got jobs at the old Girdle's Restaurant. Okay, if you read a lot of ghost story books in Oregon, look up Girdle's Restaurant because that was the name, not Twisted Fish. Twisted Fish is what it is today. It's very haunted, or at least was haunted, and still people at Twisted Fish say it's haunted. But everyone at the old restaurant said it was haunted, and you know what they said? When the Shiloh Inn was being built, because they tore the old hotel, all the employees left the old hotel, and so did the ghosts, and they got jobs here, and that's where they are still. It's a great story, and there's a lot of real truth to it. If you talk to people in town, even if it's a legend, it's a pretty cool story. All right. Oh gosh, we're not going to get to the lighthouse. Lighthouse. I'll tell you. Lighthouse, super complicated building. The lighthouse out there. Lots of shipwrecks. There was a shipwreck a week before the lighthouse was completed, where 16 bodies washed ashore. It was a lot of things. There was also a boat that came in one day from a ship way out there to get fresh water, and a storm moved in, and the next day 4 bodies washed ashore. So the lighthouse is very important. And building it was very difficult. The lighthouse has a really interesting sordid history. It eventually became a place where you could take the remains of your loved ones out there, and then it was shut down. It was called Eternity at Sea. So you pay a bunch of money to have your loved ones' remains taken to this island, which you're never going to see again. So would you really know if they're out there or not? They are. And some of them are still, I think they've got them out of there now because they were shut down by the state. But that was built on a rock, and the lighthouse was built on a rock that was a Native American burial site as well. Okay, so tons of stories and legends around that. Eternity at Sea doesn't go peacefully. This is the legal battle of the state trying to shut down the fact that they were taking remains of people out there, and how they've battled the state of Oregon in that. It's a pretty amazing story. There's another place in Seaside near the Cove where you'll see a monument found on the beach April 25th, 1865. That's the 4 men that washed ashore after that ship boat came to get fresh water, and that boat went back out to the ship. The storm came in, the ship disappeared. The next morning, these 4 men from that rowboat were on the beach. No one knew who they were and never found out who they were. They were buried there right on the ocean front, and this marker's been there ever since. Starry Night Inn. This is where I stay when I stay at the Ghost Conference. But I stay in the little cabins on the side. There's 3 cabins on the side for me and my workers for the Ghost Conference, so we can use the house for ghost tours, and we rent the whole place. The Starry Night was not something we knew was super haunted. But they wanted to know if it was haunted. They didn't know much research about the whole house. I kind of got digging into some of the research. There was a fire in 1912. So guess what? Every seaside house that's historic has a date of 1912. I do a whole class about how to research stuff. If cities have fires and they don't know the date of construction and they lost the records, you can't always count on those dates, especially if you see the same date or circa, whatever. They don't know the date. Okay. And so you can't always trust some of those documents, or you need to know the history of that. So I actually found some evidence that this house was moved after the fire to this location and planted on a foundation of a house that had burned on that place. Still a lot of questions about that house that I don't know, but every day we learn a little bit more. So fascinating house. Then the owners have some little generic ghost stories, but they said, do a ghost tour here, do an investigation here. And over the years, we've now had a lot of stories, okay? One of the stories that was really interesting is this room up here. This room up here, there's multiple rooms. You can rent out each room as a hotel room. Then the main floor is for everyone staying there. So you can rent the whole place out, or you can rent individual rooms. All the rooms upstairs have ghost stories. Okay. The one back here, one of the mediums or one of the psychics went into that room and described not seeing a woman, but knowing that there was a woman there standing at the window looking out. And what's down here is the 3 cabins next to they're built new construction. So there's 3 rooms down here. This woman was looking out towards the cabins, and the psychic said that. And she said she also got the name Angela. Okay, well, that didn't connect to any of the ghost stories, and we didn't know that was happening. And then later that night, someone said, "Oh, where was the woman looking out the window?" They're like, "Oh, she was looking at that cabin right there. Oh, that's where Rocky's mom's staying, and her name's Angela." And my mom won't stay in that house, but later on, we had another paranormal group that went into that room. When you're doing paranormal investigations, you have a small room and you have someone investigating, and then you go in there, you see someone's in there, you kind of give them their space. So one of the investigators, actually Pete Orbea, who's from Port Gamble, Washington, does the Port Gamble ghost tours and does a radio show. He goes into the room, sees a woman standing in there, says, "Oh, sorry, I'll leave you to, there was no one in there." Okay, we find out later. So some really cool things there. I stay here. I'm giving out way too much detail. This is where we stay, me and my help. This is the truck that hauls all the crap from Oregon City to the ghost conference, okay? And we stay there because as far as we know, it's not haunted. People think that they want, stay in the haunted place. No, I need to sleep. I'm up till, I work at the ghost conference from 8 a.m. till 4 a.m. And then I go to sleep and I go back at 8 a.m. for 3 nights, okay? Because that's how late our tours go. Yeah. All right, so we found out the first couple of years in Seaside that maybe the ghosts didn't want me to leave. I find this in Oregon City at the end of the season. It gets really active, and at the beginning of the season, it gets really active because they know I'm done for the season doing tours. It's like, Rocky, they're trying to get my attention. And so the first couple of years in Seaside, every time we got done with the ghost conference and we're tired, I'd get in that U-Haul truck and we'd try to leave. And we almost could never leave. The first one of the years, the car keys. Now imagine it's me, and I don't know what you know of me when I get tired, or anybody that gets tired, or a mother and son when they get tired. I had the keys. Then I didn't have the keys. I gave them to my mother. We won't get into the story, but the keys were gone. The keys to get out of it. We can't leave until we find the dang keys. We spent an hour looking for the keys. We searched everywhere looking for the keys. We unpacked the car. We undid the suitcases. We looked for hours for the keys and through all the cars. And next thing you know, there were keys sitting on the suitcase. They just reappeared. The next year, the convoy of Rocky's crew moves out of the parking lot, and I'm trying to turn this stupid U-Haul around and get it out of the driveway. And everyone leaves, and I'm like, okay, we're getting out of Seaside. And I go to start the U-Haul. It won't start. The key won't go. And I'm like, oh my God, I just want to go home. Because some of these nights, I work the next day at high school. If it's Seaside weekend and I go back on Monday, it depends. Sometimes it goes comes to the beginning of the considering break, sometimes it's at the end. So sometimes I have to go right to school the next day. And I'm just like exhausted, and I gotta go. I just let me go home. And I start a couple times, and I think I finally said, do you want us to come back? Because I was thinking maybe that's the deal. They don't want us to leave. And I said, I promise we'll be back. And it started. And I got out of there. You develop a relationship with these places. And I can't explain it, but it's an amazing place. Okay, we're going to cut it off here. I will talk about Port Gamble a little bit. Port Gamble is a beautiful town. Come in November. November, Veterans Day weekend, Port Gamble Ghost Conference. It's the sister ghost conference to my ghost conference. Pete Orbea plans it. It's a smaller convention than mine, but it's a town of Port Gamble. The entire town was owned by a company, and it is like the coolest town has ever been to Port Gamble. It's near Port Townsend. So Port Townsend is across the water from Port Townsend. Port Gamble is like you drive onto an 1800s movie set. Every building was owned by the company, and now that company no longer exists. So Pete is hired as the manager of the town. Okay, he has keys to every building in the town, and the Ghost Conference opens all these buildings up, and some of them are rented out and leased out to people's shops and stuff, and some of them are completely abandoned and left. But it is the coolest town, and this is the church. It's haunted. I've spent the last 2 years late at night in this church. Beautiful church. I'm not showing. This is the main street of Port Gamble. Little shops in these old houses that were all workers from the company. They're all little shops and things. They almost all are haunted. Okay, and the owners are happy to talk about it. And most of these shops are open during Fort Gamble Ghost Conference. This is one of the doctor's house, and it has some. This is one of the creepiest places. Especially upstairs, that house. This is the little fire station that's no longer a fire station. This is the old Masonic Hall. I mean, look at this town. This is the theater and the post office of the town. That's the store. And you're all on this waterway here. The cemetery is right up on the hill there of the town. It's cool. I speak there some years, but some years when I do my own ghost conference, sometimes I just want to go enjoy the ghost conference and see all the people I'm supposed to be hanging out with at my conference, but I can't talk to. So sometimes I'm like a speaker at this conference, and sometimes I just go enjoy it. So this year I'm not speaking. I'm just going to be there. But this is the Walker Ames house, completely empty, used for filming movies. It is probably the most haunted house in Washington, the Walker Ames house. First time I went into that house, I had issues with the attic. I had issues with the basement. The first time I saw what I think was an apparition that scared me was a black shadow that was not a person. And I'm not a dog person, but I don't know if it was a dog or whatever it was. It was a black shadow that was at this level through the basement, and that's a well-known story there. And I saw it. I couldn't tell you what it was. It scared me. Those kind of things, I don't see things as often as I feel them or experience them on my tours, but I do have plenty of experiences myself. But it's rare that I see things like that. And that house, I've taken many friends there who will never go back to that house. But it's a beautiful house. I don't know if I have pictures. Yes, here's the house. This is the inside of the house. The staircases, the fireplaces. I love the stairway, the stained glass windows. This is the closet or an area upstairs that's left for the spirits. No one's allowed to go in there. We keep respect for that space. That's on the second floor of the house. The bathroom, this is the other place that I got really bad stomach issues. And then I found out that there was a story tied to a woman who lost her child in that house. And it's a horrible story. But a lot of the feelings I was getting in these rooms ended up coming back to be true. I'm not saying I'm psychic. I'm still skeptic about that. But I've had confirmed things that I feel a lot of times. This is the attic of the house. This is one of the other fireplaces. There is a parlor area downstairs that we were all sitting my first time in the house. I have a friend named William Becker that's here in Oregon City. And he's a psychic as well. He helped on my tours years ago and helped me create the Ghost Conference. We were all sitting in the Walker Ames house in seats, and there was an empty chair next to me. We were in a circle, just kind of experiencing the house. And I attract ghosts of kids. Okay. I don't have kids of my own. I'm a teacher. I have 10, 20,000 students in this town. Everywhere I go, I connect with them. But when I go to haunted places, it's the kid ghosts that follow me. And I can't explain it, but I will get a feeling that there's something near me, and I don't say it because you get a feeling. And I usually downplay it, and I just, I just ignore it. But it happened to me on the Queen Mary, where there's a little girl at the swimming pool. It happened to me in California at the Preston Castle, which was a horrible school where they took special needs kids in the time that was not a thing that you did, and you took their kids away. And it's a horrible place. There was a little boy I felt was following me at Preston Castle, and all these other paranormal people were there. Jay Verberg from Ghost Mine TV show and all these people, and they all have all this equipment. And I'm sitting in a wheelchair in the old infirmary of the Preston Castle, and I feel someone near me. There's a little kid right by me, and I don't know how I can say it. I can see him. I just felt it. And then I felt his emotion. I felt like he came to me because I didn't have a bunch of gadgets. Can you imagine people asking questions and shoving cameras and he didn't want that. And so I said, and as soon as I said, I think there's someone standing next to me, I got the heck out of there because it was making me uncomfortable because everyone came near me. And I got out of there. I go immediately up the stairs, not this house, but Preston Castle, go up the stairs. And I go up the stairs, and William Becker is sitting on the floor above the stairs. And I get to the top of the stairs, and he says, "Who's the little boy with you?" Okay, at this house, I'm sitting with William and a bunch of other people, and there's an empty chair next to me, and I feel that there's a little girl next to me. I think that. And William said, "What's going on?" I said, "I think there's a little girl sitting next to me." And he said, "Well, what do you think she looks like?" And I didn't really have a picture, but I kind of thought her hair was up. I didn't see her, but in my head, I kind of described her. And then they brought a photograph. I didn't know there was a little kid there. And there she was. I can't stop it. It's crazy. So this house, the basement is where I had some of my issues down there. Not as scary as the Preston Castle in Ione, California, but anyway. All right, we're going to get to some questions. If you'd like to read, the first book that I was ever in is Oregon Ghost Stories. It was written, when I was in, I think, high school. When I worked at the Ermatinger House, and they came and did a book, and I gave them a couple stories along with Marge Harding, who worked with me when I was a kid at the Ermatinger House. This book didn't come out till I was a teacher, and one of my kids came with this book and says, "Is this you?" It says Rocky in Oregon City. I said, "It's probably me." That was the first book. I haven't written. There's Secrets of the Paranormal, which chapter 4 is about me and all of my things that I've done. Questions about paranormal world. Some of the seaside stuff is in there. My story at Preston Castle's in there. A new book came out. Janice lives in Nevada and wrote a big book of Oregon ghost stories, and so she's borrowed a couple of my stories. I said, "I'll give you the ones that I tell everyone. I'm not going to give you I'm not going to give you the good ones because that's going in my book." But so things like the haunted McLaughlin House and elevator, and I think it's the elevator in here, and I think she talks about some of the seaside stories, the bridge tender. I think I put in there, but the rest of the stories are go in my own book. This is a new book that just came out where it has references for different things in the Northwest of ghost things and ghost tours. And there's little hints to go to the Port Gamble Ghost Conference or Ghost Conference and my tours and other places in the state to go to. Those are the books that, that's the Ermatinger House in its first location. You can see talks about Marge and Silk Ribbons and my story there. That's the paranormal Secrets of the Paranormal. It's a retired cop that wrote this book and interviewing different paranormal investigators from across the country, 7 of us. Big book of Oregon Ghost Stories and haunts. All right. Events coming up. Living History Tour tomorrow night at the cemetery. We're finally bringing back the Mountain View Ghost. Sorry, it's not a ghost tour. Spirits tour. What do? It's like the Lone First Cemetery tour. It's sold out, I think, tomorrow night. But that's good because we're bringing it back. We haven't done this in like a decade. You wander through the Mountain View Cemetery with a guide. You go to the headstones and hear from the people that are buried there. So I'll be playing Sidney Moss tomorrow night at the cemetery, who built who built one of the early hotels in Oregon City and started the first school. Halloween season. I'm doing tours every Friday, Saturday night now through Halloween. I'm doing a big special Halloween tour on Halloween night. I always do a special Halloween night tour that's longer than the regular tour, so over 2 hours. Plus, you get a special Halloween treat, and you get some special prizes. We get to visit certain people's neighborhood houses, and we get to visit a cemetery that only appears during Halloween on Madison Street, and then vanishes. It's beautiful. So if you ever want to join us to the Halloween night tour, I think there's still tickets for that. Saturday Night Spirits at the Ermatinger House is our next event at the Ermatinger House. Friends of Ermatinger House. And Steven Crawford part of this one or not? Okay, so we're both houses?
Yeah, just like Friday Night Fridays.
This one, if you've not done this, you get boat tours through Ermatinger and Stevens Crawford House. I'll be telling my stories of the house and experiences at the house. You get to tour the house. You get to go in the attic and basement of the Stevens Crawford House with paranormal investigators. Is it sold out?
No, there's still tickets.
Okay, that's November.
It'll go fast.
Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Day, right? Okay. So get tickets for that. Port Gamble Ghost Conference, November 7th through 9th. Spirits of Christmas, my Christmas Ghost Tours of Oregon City, the 2 weekends before Christmas, and the Oregon Ghost Conference in Seaside March, spring break. Okay, we got we're over 7 minutes. Can we do a little bit of questions? Okay, I'll take a little bit of questions and then I'll do the rest of the questions on the street. I did it in an hour though. Oh, 2 hours, but I did it. And I didn't use any of my. So those of you who don't know this, I had a surgery September 9th. I haven't been at the high school for 3 weeks. My first day back was Wednesday. I've done a full day of Wednesday school. Speaking, it was a throat surgery, so I had to shake my voice. I had a full day of school and city commission meetings all night Wednesday night. Yesterday I had a full day of school and cemetery dress rehearsal. Yesterday. Tonight I have school all day and this, and tomorrow night cemetery tour. So I told the doctor, I said, I have to be ready. I have to be ready for October, and I need my voice. So my surgery went well, and I'm back to the real world. And so I had all these notes because I was fearing I wasn't prepared for that, as I always do. I didn't even look at it. Okay, questions?
What is the most convincing experience you've ever had, the very most convincing experience you've ever had that would convince you of the reality of ghosts?
Okay. Well, the one of the little girl at the Port Gamble was one that I thought, okay, I actually have some ability here. And that's, I think, the thing you have to be careful with, that if you don't think you're psychic, you're probably wrong. We all have these feelings and we can write it off to coincidence or whatever. I've learned that none of this is coincidental. And so I'm learning that as I go. So that was one of them. The experience at the Ermatinger House with the chair is one of them. I won't go into that because that's my story I tell every time. But Preston Castle, I may have told this last time. Preston Castle bothered me. It's in Island, California. It's this big stone castle that was a school for special needs kids that their parents took them there, left them there. It bothered me. That kid followed me around. And later I got away from everyone, and I knew that kid wanted to leave. And I knew that kid wanted to go with me. And he can't. And I said, you have to stay here. I'll come back. And I haven't been back since. It really bothered me because I made a promise to go back. I will go back. I was supposed to go into the Preston Castle the second night. I couldn't do it. That castle is 4 stories. I think the fourth or fifth story is you can't get up to anymore because the building's collapsing. The top story that you can get to, I think, is the 3rd or 4th floor, and it's filled with bats. So you are literally in this abandoned castle and these rooms and some of them are brought back to restoration to some degree, but you were literally hearing bats flying out, and it's like they're like, duck down and keep your mouth closed. It's like I can't even believe I did it. So we're in that castle, and I had that experience with this little boy. And the thing that really bothered me, there was a woman that worked at Preston Castle that was murdered, and there's some mixed stories about that, and whether it was the kids that. I don't know all the history, and I didn't go search it, but there's a history there of a woman being killed that worked at the school near the pool area. The pool area is still there, and the pool was not, it sounds like, they had a pool. Remember, this is like a sanitarium, basically, and this is where they deloused the kids, and this is where it was a horrible place. So we're in this area where she was killed. And I didn't feel much there. You can feel a heaviness there. But then we start going into this old kitchen. And it's an old kitchen where the kids would have to work like you would do on like summer camp or something. And you do your chores or whatever. But so I could feel it. And then there's a little stairway that goes down to probably what was an old pantry. But because it's not being used and it's an odd place that's off the kitchen, they put kind of a memorial to the woman who was killed. And I go in there and I was like, it scared me because that room bothered me more. But it's not because she's there. And it's not because that's where she was murdered, but that's because they made that place. They made that her place, right? Because people tour the pool, and now the reference to her is there, and not many people go in there, and you go in there and she's there, or that story is there, and you feel it. Now, I didn't know other than the woman had been killed. So I walked down the steps, and I can't remember who I was with. A lot of these weirdos from the ghost conference with me, right? And when I mean there's psychics, it's a great group of people. It's like, but they all wear black and we're all weird. So I'm in this pantry room, and there's remnants to this story. And I just remember saying, how was she killed? Or I don't know I said, what happened? What happened? How did she die? And they're like, she was killed. I said, I know she was killed. Like, I know that. But how? And they said she was strangled. And I was feeling this shoulder pain and this neck pain, and like someone was choking me. And that bothered me because I felt that before I walked in there. Complete coincidence? Maybe. I don't believe it. I believe I felt it. And I talked about this last year, Irma Tinger house. Can't go into the whole story, but there's a cop in the Irma Tinger house. Okay. And I grew up in a cop family. And in one of the rooms of the Irma Tinger house, I felt a hand grab my shoulder and squeeze it because I was telling a story I shouldn't tell. That's why I don't tell the whole story. And if there is any other way that anyone knows of a cop to tell you to be quiet without telling you to be quiet, that's it. I do tell that story outside the house. But so I've had a couple of occurrences I can't do photographs. People say, oh, look, there's a ghost. Sure, whatever. I'm a visual person. I don't do photographs because it's like, who knows if it's a ghost? But how can you deny something like that? Something that you experience. Now, I could be my perception. I'm not saying that's exactly true, but I feel it and I believe it. And so those kind of experiences, I think, are what have impacted me the most, and especially the kid ones. That really, I worked up at Dornbecker Children's Hospital a long time, and when we think about how lucky we are, I talk to my students about this, when we have bad days and we go through things, I realize how lucky I am because I know there's so many kids that didn't have as much time. And so when you go into a place and hear these stories, it's pretty amazing. All right, that was one answer.
What is the significance of women's bath?
Good question. I'm sure people have many theories on that. Let's just erase women's restroom and just talk about restrooms in general. Jason Carpenter is a speaker at our Ghost Conference, and I think he talked last year, or is it this year he's talked about haunted restrooms? I think last year he talked about haunted restrooms. It was a great talk. He's very funny. I think this year he's talking about haunted underwear.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that's just a gimmick to get people, but haunted clothes. Okay, he's talking about that. Haunted bathrooms. I think it goes back to that list. Running water is part of it. People think that running water is part of it. I think that's a big part of it. Here's the other thing, and I'll give you a really quick Riverview Hotel story. They always used to let me stay in the Riverview Hotel when I was doing Ghost Conference because all my people at the Ghost Conference were staying there. I live in Oregon City, but I would stay at River Shore Hotel because that's where the convention was, and it's my responsibility there. But of course, it was late nights and whatever. And they would always, when I would check in the River Shore Hotel, they would say, "Here's your room." I would check in at like 1 o'clock in the morning. They'd be really mysterious. "Oh, you're Rocky. This is your room." I'm like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with me?" I just want to go to sleep. And they would play. They loved it. They just go up there. I'm like, "Oh my God." So I go up there to this hotel room. And it seems fine. And I'm like, fine, but I got to go to bed. I'm going to take my contacts. I go in the restroom. Take my contacts. I go in the restroom. And I'm like, oh, my God. Something's wrong with this room. This restroom is bothering me. And I decided I got to go to sleep. So I go to sleep. Next morning, I go to check out. They're like, so what do you think? I'm like, what the hell happened in that room? They said, well, this woman killed herself in the room. And I said, oh my gosh. And I said, she died in the bathroom. I said that because I said, I said, felt that. I didn't say I felt that, but I said, she must have died. The rest of it. No, she died in the bed. So I'm like, that's a whole nother story because I had a friend that worked in a hotel. I said, if someone dies in a hotel bed, what do? Do they change the sheets? Do they change the mattress? Okay. And I guess it just depends on how they died. So, but here's the thing. How did she kill herself? She took pills. Well, where do you do that? She killed herself in the bathroom. She went to sleep in the bed. When we are hurt and when we're sick and when a lot of the tragedies happen in our house or whatever, it's the kitchen or the bathroom. And so part of it is the water and the energy, and I think part of it is what really happens in these places or the connection to it. And so I think that's where you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're dealing with your life and you're dealing with the things that you're going through and you're ending the day or starting the day. There's a lot of emotion in that room, in that place, right? So that's can any of us prove that? No, but
Hollywood Theater.
Hollywood Theater. My coworker at the high school, we used to work at the Hollywood Theater. It is haunted, and I don't go there a lot. I love going there. I don't know the history. I think it's a man in one of the theaters that is a military person, and he's seen there frequently. There's some other stories about the Hollywood Theater. Theaters are also a repetitive thing. You have drama, you have all these things, but you have another place where people are tied there to entertainment. And there's a whole theory about why theaters are a place of gathering, but I don't know a lot about the Hollywood Theater other than if you haven't gone to a movie there, go to it. I can't remember which theater is the haunted one, but I've started finding myself going to the old theaters. Oregon City had multiple theaters, the State Theater, the Liberty Theater, the Star Theater. I just learned about the Grand Theater. I'm not going to say that. There's a plate online that's on auction on eBay from the Grand Theater in Oregon City, this plate, and I want to buy it. And I just screwed it up. So now it's going to go on. I had to look it up. So I don't know. There is a whole theory, and I can't remember what the theory is why theaters, but a lot of theaters are haunted. Yes. Mostly West Coast. Yeah, because I'm so busy. I mean, when I retire, I'll try to do more. But really, the places I've talked about, probably Preston Castle in California, Queen Mary. One of my other favorite places, the Winchester Mystery House. Oh, I regret this. The Winchester Mystery House called me one time because they wanted to do a paranormal convention there and they wanted my advice. And I thought, oh my gosh, can you imagine? I don't know if you know the Winchester Mystery House, but I was like, the Winchester Mystery House called me. And I thought I'm going to be doing events there, and I didn't get connected with them again because the world changed. But I pretty much Oregon, Washington, California. There's a place way up in the mountains of Washington called Wellington. It's a town that was wiped off the map by an avalanche that knocked a train over a cliff with 200 people in it that were stranded in the mountains. And they're still there. Their spirits are still there. It was one of the creepiest places I've ever been. But I've not done. I mean, I go on ghost tours in other cities, but I don't do a lot of it because I don't have the connection to that. But when I retire, I'd hope to go mostly the West Coast. Yes. Okay.
Oh, we're going to the Winchester House?
Yes.
We are.
Yes, do it.
But I'm also going to go on the haunted tour.
Okay, is that an October? I see I never do that one because it's always in
road
October.
trip,
Oh,
and so
okay.
there's multiple places, and you haven't heard of it?
It's like the Oregon Haunted Road.
Yes, I have heard about it. I don't know much about it.
I was going to ask for some more suggestions. I don't feel like we had a lot of.
Oh, okay.
Except for me.
I can talk to you more if there's some more thoughts.
What happened to Ray's first wife?
She died at the Oregon State
She
Hospital.
buried at the
You know, I
hospital?
don't know.
Because that's what should be haunting them.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the history of the Oregon State Hospital, and Oregon State Hospital was built after that. What happened is, and the short bit is this: eventually, the bodies of people that died at the Oregon State Hospital and the old asylums just disappeared, right? Because who's going to claim these bodies of people that died and went to the asylum that are never going to be seen by their family again, are going to be basically disowned? And who's going to pay for their burials? Who's going to pay for their funerals? Who's going to care that they're even gone? People like Charity Lamb, who murdered her husband just outside of Oregon City. These people disappeared. And people started saying, well, where are they buried? Where did they go? And Lone First Cemetery, there's a vacant plot there where it turns out that most of the people from Hawthorne's Asylum were buried in a vacant plot, but the Multnomah County built a building on it because it wasn't part of the cemetery. And then everyone said there is bodies probably, or not bodies, but remains there. And not only remains of people that were buried from Hawthorne's Asylum, but the Chinese laborers that built the railroads for Ben Holiday, who died and their bodies were supposed to be sent home, were never sent home. Where did they get buried? Or where did their remains go? And people said they're in that lot. And Multnomah County said, no, they're not. And guess what? They were. And so they tore the building down. Oregon State Hospital, they started saying there was this urban legend that the people were in the walls, that the remains of the people from the state hospital were put into canisters and were in the walls. And people said it's not true. It's true. And they're still there. And you can go and see the canisters. You can still see where they found them. And so that's why they're going back and looking at some of those properties. I don't know if Edgefield has been done, but like some of those properties, you look up in the newspapers, I think the recent the most recent state hospital, they were doing radar testing, testing on the ground to see if there was burials there. So I can't even remember what the question was. Oh, what happened to? Got it. Okay, we're gonna end this up because they're gonna get out of here. But I will pack up and hang out outside, or come on my tours. I left cards over here for the ghost hunters and the ghost.
Thank you very much for coming, everybody. We will ask you next about this storm. We're not leaving Rossi because we're going to
Thank you. Where is that? The actual cemetery? No. Yeah.
Got a block behind the,
Oh, okay, sure.